It's got me hooked and won't let me go, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I was very fortunate to be able to have a close friendship with him over the years. He trusted me enough over a period of time to become his head trainer at the school, trying to keep his name going. One of my former students, Ivar, as you just saw on Monday night, became tag team champions. Probably one of the things that I admire most about Ivar is his willingness not to take no for an answer. Kofi kind of stuck out with where there was something unique about him. Scott said, hey, we're looking at a building in Concord. Would you be interested in coming to take a look at it? WWE ID program was basically thought about back in 2015. They're just two local guys from New Hampshire doing our thing and trying to do it right. To be able to do that piece with him, Scott and I were really happy for him. Brad is he's got a natural gift. I mean, he's athletic, he's young. You never know. I'm getting old. You never know, but anything's possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, hosted by Coach C, Chris Sanders, this is Best for Business.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Another episode of Best for Business. I'm absolutely pumped for this one. New England wrestling legend Mike Hollow, thank you for joining me for this one.
Hey, no problem. Glad you're having me on. It's always great when we can sit down and talk about the world of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of my research earlier. I was talking even to Joe Bruin about you for a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was wondering about your career. Now, even when you got inducted in the New England Wrestling Hall of Fame, one word always comes up, and that word is coach. Now, for you, how did pro wrestling, how did you fall in love with it?
Probably like everybody else, and probably even like yourself, as a young kid, I remember distinctly, 5 years old, sitting at home on a Saturday morning, watching Saturday morning wrestling. And, it's just been one of those things that's been with me ever since. And, I can't shake it. It's got me hooked and won't let me go, but, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, and then one of the things that caught my eye that you were to be a part of, I don't know how it even happened to be, but tell me about being a ring crew assistant for the WWF, because I don't even know if that's possible nowadays.
Oh, I don't know much. I was graduating college. I didn't have anything really planned. I had a friend of mine at the time that was refereeing for the WWF, and he says, hey, they're looking for some help, and one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I'm driving the Brother Lev set from Connecticut to all the way to California on a 3-day run, and the rest is history for 2 years. So, hell of an experience. So all good stuff.
So when you talk about college, go post college, did you have a plan, or did you have an idea of what you wanted to do?
I wanted to be in law enforcement. I was, my family was in law enforcement, and I wanted to be either a state trooper or a local police officer, and it's just one of those things where I got sidetracked, and wrestling ended up hooking me, and ended up getting into, the construction business with what I'm in now, my regular job. So that's kind of how it all started.
So to go with that, being on the ring for all those times, do you have like any good stories or moments or memories from doing them?
I think, the big thing was just, being around the boys, being around the agents, having that different perspective from when I was a young kid, from, not behind the curtain to being behind the curtain, and just seeing really how things operate, and from an educational standpoint, and learning the ins and outs of the business from some of the people that I was able to rub elbows with and, remain friends with over the years after I, left that role. So it was really valuable from a teaching standpoint. I'll say that.
Yeah, and to go with that, you said you did ring crew. Originally, you wanted to go in law enforcement, but you start training in 1992. So what made you eventually make that jump for pro wrestling?
Well, I've been with the ring crew for 2 years, and before the shows, I'd be rolling around the ring, and before the arenas would fill up, so forth and so on, and just talking to the boys, and seeing Kowalski at local events, and connecting with him. I just decided, it was time for me to, venture down that road to visit, Walter. His school was over in Malden, Mass, and I grew up in Saugus, Mass. So it was a short ride, and the rest was history for, Walter and I.
What was the first time? Do you remember that first interaction meeting Killer Kowalski?
Intimidating.
Yeah.
Intimidating. It's interesting. Walter has this persona or perception of, he was a heel for 20 plus years, but I was very fortunate to be able to have a close friendship with him over the years. I was very fortunate too with where he trusted me enough over a period of time to become his head trainer at the school, which was a huge honor. And for now, it's the same thing, just trying to keep his name going and doing things the right way. But that first experience was, like I said, it was intimidating. For you hear that often as guys and girls climb the stairs over a Malden for the first time when they go to meet Walter.
Yeah, so one of the guys I'm going to be having on my podcast actually next week was going to be John Walters. And I remember he just went on Leo's show and he was talking about his first interaction. But for
Yeah.
you, what would you say is like some of the biggest things you learned from Kowalski?
Always believe in yourself.
Hmm.
Believe in yourself. Shoot for the stars. Continue to keep going, even when you hear no is no. Just continue to persevere through. And for Walter, one of the things, the life lessons he had shared with me when he was breaking into the business for 4 years, they were trying to drive him out of the business. And, he just continued to keep coming back for more. And as he said to me, you'll hear no more often than you'll hear yes. But you just got to keep your nose down, your name clean, and just keep pushing and do things right. And opportunities present themselves over a period of time.
Yeah, and to go with that, another guy I wanted to ask you about, I don't know if you had any stories, Steve Bradley.
I didn't know him well. I mean, we worked on local shows, so forth and so on, but I really didn't have a close relationship, to be perfectly honest with you. But a good hand, good talent. Started WWFA, a long time ago, and isn't it interesting how it's back again today?
Yeah. So I'm curious, Mike Hollow's a coach nowadays, like you mentioned, you trained a lot of people, but I'm curious, all those years back, can you walk me through your first ever match?
It's funny. I was sitting down, I was talking to my girlfriend today, and I said, you know what? I can't think of my first match. If I was to guess, I probably want to say it was against gorgeous Chris Duffy. If I was to be a betting man, nervous as all hell, green as can be, and just fortunate enough with where he was able to take care of me and keep me. So that's the best I can recollect.
Yeah. So when I was doing my research and going through, I noticed that there were some times in your career where you wrestled the same opponents day after day. So the first one I would ask you about wrestling the Headbangers.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
We were doing the dojo shows with Bruce Pritchard. Freddie Spada was actually running the shows, and it was Duke Dalton and I as the Annihilators working against those guys, and a lot of fun to be within the ring. Taught us a lot, good experience, and overall good guys.
Yeah, and then the other person I noticed, I think you wrestled him 3 times back to back, Jeff Jarrett.
Great experience. I
Yeah.
mean, anytime you can get in the ring with a ring veteran like that, and either before or after, or even during the course of the match, and have those learning moments with where they point out little things that make a significant difference with how the audience is going to react and from an emotional standpoint, and just being able to pull the audience in with you. I think that was probably the biggest thing with Jeff. I remember one time we were doing a double down, and he said, "Whatever you do, don't move." We laid still to 9. Everything he talked about, and then, as we were continuing on, the place was going bananas. But he was a lot of fun to work with as well.
Yeah, so when we look at Mike Hollow's career, I noticed at one point or a few points you were a part of a tag team. So one of the ones I would ask you about, I believe it was the Kowalski Killer. So throughout your career, what are your overall takes, especially where it is now on tag team wrestling?
Tag team wrestling today, I mean, one of the things I'm excited about, and one of my former students, Ivar, as you just saw on Monday night, became tag team champions. I think it's healthy. I think it's doing well. I think there's a lot out there. I think WWE does a good job of trying to, keeping that alive and with where it's flourishing and keeping it interesting. So I think it's in a good spot.
So yeah, so the first person I wanted to ask you about training was Ivar. Do you have any stories? Do you remember when he first came into training school?
Um, he came in as a regular student, but one of the things that was really interesting about him, and there was a group of them. There was Ivar, there was Tomasso, there was Kofi, and Altus, Vince Vicalo. A lot of those guys, they would always come to practice early. And before we even get started, they'd be rolling around the ring for an hour, 2 hours before. But probably one of the things that I admire most about Ivar is just his willingness not to take no for an answer. He heard it many, many times over the years, from just not the right time, injuries, so forth and so on. But It's great when you can sit down on a Monday night and watch him become tag team champions and think about all the trials and tribulations that he's gone through and how hard he's worked. Never gave up on his dream. So um, I can't say enough about him.
What's been the transformation you'd say you've seen of Tommaso Ciampa's career?
I think Tomasso's transformation, he ended up getting hired in the developmental, and then he ended up getting let go, and then he went over to Europe and was working over there for a while. And when he came back, I think he was a different type of talent. He was able to find himself work wise, character wise, and you look at his in ring work now. He reminds me a lot of Gunther. Everything he does is solid. It's not flashy, but it's just consistent. There's no holes. There's no gaps. Just works hard, solid performer, and just as much as a person in and out of the ring. You couldn't ask for a nicer guy.
Yeah, and then speaking of transformation, you mentioned another person one before, Kofi Kingston. To see his rise throughout his career, especially having that WrestleMania moment, what have been your takes seeing that transformation of Kofi?
I think one of the interesting things I share about Kofi, he started with us in 2005. He was with us for a year. He ended up getting noticed at a tryout camp that we were running at my old school. A few of the agents came from the office to see. Basically signed him that day. But one of the things that's really admirable about him is his ability to have longevity in his career and still be on Monday night, still be fresh, still be relevant, and understand the business with where it's got its peaks and it's got its valleys, its ups and downs, and just really be able to ride that and not let his ego get in the way. And it's really allowed him to be in the position that he's in. Hall of Famer. You can't say enough about him.
How about wrestling Bradshaw on Shotgun Saturday Night, September 1st, 1998, a year later?
Well, I won't forget that one. That was a hell of a 5 minute experience with basically I got my ass kicked.
Yeah.
But, no, good experience. Great to work with those guys who really just 275 pounds of non-stop action for 5 minutes, but definitely knew that you were in the ring with them. That's for sure.
Yeah. So when we look at your career, whether it's traveling for helping with the ring crew to even nowadays, what have been like some of your favorite venues or places you got to see through wrestling?
Madison Square Garden's always a favorite. The old Garden was a favorite. Philadelphia Spectrum. I got to see so many of the arenas as I was traveling around. But I would say Madison Square Garden was probably one of my most favorites.
And then when we look throughout Mike Hollow's career, who would you say you're some of your biggest mentors in wrestling?
Obviously Walter. I mean, to kind of put it in perspective, if it wasn't for Walter believing in me and giving me an opportunity to do with what I'm doing now, and the life lessons he taught me, as we, with our friendship, he played a huge role. Still teaching his beliefs today. The other one who I was able to become friends with was Pat Patterson. Friends with him for many, many years, and just a tremendous wealth of knowledge, psychology-wise, talent development, what to look for, just so much. And so to be around Walter, Pat, the other guy was a referee, Freddie Spotter, another smart guy, and the other guy I got to give a shout out to that I think that's very wise is my good old friend Jim Kettner from ECWA. Those 3 or 4 guys, very influential, and very fortunate to be able to call all of them friends.
Yeah. So I'm curious, all the way till now, what was your first interaction with Scott Reed? Do you remember that? The first time meeting him?
He was a student.
Wow.
He was a student at CTC, and he was at Bradley's, and he ended up coming over to us. He trained with us for a little while, and then kind of lost track of him. And then ultimately he and I reconnected back in Manchester before we opened up. Before he opened up the school in Concord. So it was kind of hit or miss, to be perfectly honest with you. Kind of strange how things came about.
Yeah. Have you ever had one person that walked in at day one that you knew instantly they were going to be a star?
I can't because there's so much that goes, whether it's from a physicality standpoint, mental aptitude, coachability, ego. I mean, there's so many fundamental pieces that go into developing talent and seeing with where talent's going to go. how they handle the ups and downs, how they take constructive criticism, how do they handle being coached. But after a while, I mean, Kofi kind of stuck out with where there was something unique about him. But, you can even say the same thing about Ivar and Tomasso. I mean, they were just students of the game. So, those little intangibles I kind of tend to look for to kind of see with what their makeup is and how much they're willing to get after it and continue to strive for. When they hear no, how do they react and what do they do with it?
Yeah, so when we talked earlier about Scott Reed and you talk about the Elite Pro Wrestling Academy, did you have a vision for what you wanted it to be? Because we see the social media posts, the highlight reels of everything it has to offer, even on the websites. Did you have a vision? Was this your vision exactly?
So for me, so I had taken a little time off from teaching, and I went back to teaching in Manchester for a little while. And I was talking to the office because I was looking to get permission to do a video with Kofi, and the office had said, "Hey, we hear a lot of good things are going on up in the New England area. We'd like to come out and visit." But I knew with where I was at the time from a facility standpoint, it wouldn't have met the criteria for bigger and better things. And just out of coincidence, Scott said, "Hey, we're looking at a building in Concord. Would you be interested in coming to take a look at it and see it? And what are your thoughts?" So, being open-minded, I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take a look." And it had great potential, and to see with what it's turned in today and how it's evolved. And my number one goal I'll share with you is I didn't want to come back just to teach. I wanted to come back and I wanted to have a relationship with the office one way or another from developing talent. And again, from a timing standpoint, with where the WWE ID program was basically thought about back in 2015, but the dynamics weren't right throughout the company. And, with the shift of with people and so forth and so on, and Hunter being such a advocate for independent talent, and him being from the Northeast, and then our connection from Walter and so forth and so on, everything just kind of came into place. But it was a long 2-year journey behind the scenes, probably the best kept secret that was going on that no one knew about, to kind of get it to fruition.
So when you talk about you didn't come back just for coaching, I thought for a second you said you were going to come back to wrestle and lace up the boots one more time.
Maybe, you never know. I'm getting old. You never know, but anything's possible.
So to go with that, you mentioned it. What does that mean to you to have the Elite Pro Wrestling Academy be the WWEID school for New England?
I think to really put it in perspective, when you look at the 5 schools throughout the country and the different locations that they are, and for the office to have the confidence and the trust to pick Scott and I to lead, to do with what we do, and the rest of them are WWE Hall of Famers. We're just 2 local guys from New Hampshire doing our thing and trying to do it right, both in and out of the ring from a professional standpoint. For me, basically, with what it says is that they trust us to do the right thing by the independent talent.
Yeah, so when we talk WWEID, one of the people first I want to ask you about, I believe he was like the 4th or 5th talent announced. What was it like to you guys to present Gall with the WWEID contract?
It was exciting. I mean, I was really happy for Gall. I mean, he's run the Gall. He's been trying to get after it and trying to get better. And when I found out, he was one of the 20, and he's been coming to train with us at the school, which has been great as well. And be able to do that piece with him, Scott and I were really happy for him.
Yeah, and the other student I wanted to ask you about was Brad Baylor. I remember on social media you'd post sometimes, I believe it was on like Saturdays or Sundays. At times it would just be you, Gall, and Brad. So what has been like the transformation you've seen of Brad?
I think, with Brad is he's got a natural gift. I mean, he's athletic, he's young, he's got a good look. I think one of the things I really appreciate about him, extremely coachable, takes constructive criticism. The other thing, he'd come see me every other Sunday, drive 3 hours from Connecticut and spend 3 or 4 hours with me and putting him through the paces and get in his car and say, geez, when can we do this again? So he definitely has a bright future, a lot of upside. And I think for his age, he carries himself extremely well. His parents have done a great job raising him.
Nice. And another thing I'm curious from your perspective, how did the conversation come to be to bring back the WFA?
I think it was probably more so Scott, with where I think he just wanted to, say, hey, I want to get after it. I want to try to see if I can get this back up and running again. And and here we are 2 years later, and he's. I think we're just starting to kick the tires now. There's a lot of things that are going to be exciting happening in 2025. The future's bright. We've got a lot of different new talent coming in, so we're excited about that. There's been a great influx of new students as well. So, being able to put all that together and create opportunities for guys and girls, and with the ID program, I think we're on a good path.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious from your perspective, how has professional wrestling evolved from when you first started to where it is now?
I think the biggest thing from how it's evolved is from a television standpoint, was with where its character, its performance, with where it's 70% that, and today it's 30% working. So back when, in Walter's time in 70s and 80s, it was more so the other way. It was 70% working, 30% entertainment. And now it's taking a life of its own, and from with what you see, glitz and glamour, entertainment, huge, running in, huge events. It's basically turned into a machine if you think about it.
Another thing I'm curious about, when you talked about how the wheels are just starting to turn for WFA and the Elite Pro Wrestling Academy, what would you say are Mike Hollow's and the Elite Pro Wrestling Academy's goals for 2025?
Our biggest goal is continue to train students properly, both in and out of the ring, really with where, when our talent goes to work different places, they stand out for the right reasons, in the ring, outside the ring, in the locker room. They carry themselves as true professionals. And again, just trying to create as many opportunities for the guys and girls that are, willing to trust us to kind of help, grow their careers. And, I think that's probably the other thing that's most exciting about the Elite Pro Wrestling Training Center is that, yeah, you can call it a wrestling school, but we're also, it's life skills, it's development, with where we realize that not everyone's going to go on to become a WWE or an AEW superstar. So if we can instill good work ethics, confidence, believability, how to carry yourself, how to have a conversation, and again, being able to get out in front of it in society, I think we've done our due diligence there.
And one more thing I wanted to ask you about: in 2013, you get inducted for the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. All those years later, put in all that work. What does that mean to you?
Hard work is the number one key to success. I mean, you just, there's many days with where you don't want to get after, but I mean, I've got a great opportunity. I'm privileged with what I'm able to do. People trust me to help develop them both in and out of the ring. I mean, what more could you ask for? So I think, it's a privilege to be in our business. It's not a right. So, and that's something that was instilled upon me a long time ago.
Yeah. So, Mike Hollow, I want to thank you for doing this. However, I've ended every interview the same. The day you decide it's finally over, what do you want Mike Hollow's legacy to be remembered for in pro wrestling?
Being able to impact others the best way possible so they can find success and happiness in their lives.
Yeah. Mike Hollow, I want to thank you for doing this, and I want to thank you for everything. I'm so excited to see what 2025 holds for you.
Very good. Thank you for having me. Enjoy your night. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. This was Best for Business.